How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylai Hobby Time. Maybe some of you can relate to this, but I have felt about 1 week behind for quite some time now. Like not fully caught up. Like I'm forgetting something. Either way, I missed Star Wars Day, so today we're going to make something from Star Wars. It's not necessarily going to be lore accurate, but that has never stopped me in the past. I received all the minis featured in this build from my friend Jay Han. It's been a while since clones have made an appearance on my channel, and I figured it was time that they found a permanent place on a diorama. Once the gang was mostly together, it was time to make some casualties. As we know, good soldiers follow orders, even if that means running headlong into a two-sided lightsaber-wielding red guy with spikes on his head. These 4 early birds, if you want to call them that, definitely got the worm. And by worm, I mean lightsaber. And if you're still not sure who or what could have caused so much clone mayhem, that would be this guy right here, Darth Maulius. I believe that's Latin. Comes in 2 halves, which is lore accurate. But that actually came in handy because I was able to drill a path for a wire all the way through him, which would power his lightsaber later on. After the wire had been pulled through, I got him pieced back together using the power of superglue, rather than the power of hate, which would have been a little bit more accurate to the story. Either way, it was time to move on to the base. These canvas boards can be found in a few different stores. They're only a few dollars and they make great diorama bases, especially if you want to put in lighting. They have enough space underneath for a battery housing. I made sure everyone would fit on the base and be properly spaced. And then I broke out some pre-made resin rocks and foam for the base, which I cut down to size. And then I shaved down some other pieces of foam to form a high ground. I composed the hill from multiple offcuts, which I shaved down and puzzle pieced together. I had a pretty precise fit. And then I shaved off some of the base piece of foam as well. And as I picked up the hill to move it, to begin gluing it, I dropped it on the floor amongst the rest of the offcuts that were covering my floor. I did eventually find the shapes I was looking for, and I glued it all down using hot glue, along with some fake resin rocks, which I pulled from my fake resin rock collection, as one does. The hill was all glued together and stuck down to that base piece of foam, and then I could glue it down to the wooden base as well. And this is where the fun begins. To take this clump of pink foam and fake rocks and turn it into something that looks like real terrain, I will be using a sculpt mold. Grab a couple handfuls of that and mix up the proper amount of water. I'm not really sure what the proper amount of water is, I just do it by feel. Once that had been thoroughly mixed, I slapped it down on the base, being careful not to cover the detail on those fake rocks. And boy oh boy were my exposure settings not prepared for that amount of white. The sculpt mold will take some time to cure, but in the meantime, let's paint some miniatures. Once the crew had all been prepared and was ready to go on their painting handles, it was time to prime, using an airbrush and an acrylic primer. First up was Darth Maul, who got a coat of black, and that was pretty much it for his paint job. Everyone else got black as well, and you may be thinking, why paint all the white clone troopers black first? Well, if you combine white and black, you get a gradient. And from white to black, using a zenithal highlight establishes a very nice base coat for white armor with some natural shadows already built in. I added blue and yellow to the wet palette, which is honestly kind of a waste because I barely touched them for this paint job. Because they were out though, I did paint a zombie deep sea diver off camera, so as not to waste them. Then went around to all of the black details on the clone armor, as well as adding some pure white highlights. And after that, I hit the shoulders, crests, and some of the custom details with red. And this is where the cracks in the lore accuracy really start to show. Like, are these Coruscant guards fighting on another planet? Are they Mace Windu's 187th, fighting against a pre-Clone Wars Darth Maul? They are all Phase 2 troopers after all. Let's all just consider it a moment from Battlefront 2 multiplayer. Anything can happen there. Either way, like I said, Maul's paint job was basically done after that black primer. All I had to do was add some deep red, a lighter red, and then highlight the creases on his sleeves and his belt and the horns on his head. Our little Shadow Lord was ready for battle. And speaking of being behind, I actually haven't watched the Darth Maul show yet. Let me know in the comments if you think it's worth watching. My exposure problems were dry at this point, but that's nothing that a couple rotations couldn't fix. Also, the imperfect sides of this thing were bothering me a little bit, so I took that over to my bandsaw and I trimmed it down. I did that for the first time recently, and I can't believe it took me so long to figure that out. For the terrain look on this one, I decided to use the tried and true pigment powder method to create a nice dusty, almost Martian-like layer over top of the red base coat. I mixed that up with water and isopropyl alcohol and brushed it everywhere except the rocks. And the effect of this one really shines when it's dry. Well, actually it doesn't shine, it's quite matte. What I'm saying is the value of the effect is seen when it's dry. While the dust was still wet, I slapped it on the feet of the clone troopers to help blend them into the environment. And then I dry brushed some sandy tan over all of the rocks to help those edges pop. I then went over the rocks with a very thinned down version of that pigment powder to help it get down in the cracks, and finally I tied the whole thing together with a unifying coat of dust. I gave the landscape a bit of a vignetted effect by going around the perimeter with black. Then I took the whole thing outside and gave it a coat of matte varnish. It'll look better once it's fully dry, but in the meantime, I could start gluing things in place, starting with Darth Maul and his little double-bladed LED filament noodle lightsaber. I was sure to test before gluing in place. I drilled a hole all the way through, and then I used a metal rod as a fish stick, or fish rod, whatever the electricians call it, to weasel the wire all the way through. And once he had been glued in place, I could then figure out the positioning of the rest of the crew. The last guy to glue in place was the one getting force punched in the face. Needed to suspend him on a standoff mid-air. For that, I made my own clear rod using UV resin and a translucent straw. Once the rod was done, I snipped it down to the correct size, I glued it to his back, and then I glued him to the base. Next, it was time to figure out the electronics. I started by drilling a hole in the side of the base just large enough for a photon torpedo, or in this case, a toggle switch. Next, I screwed a battery housing to the underside of the base. I ran one of the leads to the switch, and then we were ready to install the blaster bolts. I used the last 3 blue filaments that I had on hand. And then I poked a few more holes for some standoffs. Once those were in place, I could solder either end of the filament. It didn't really matter at this point. I will figure out the polarity in just a minute. I added a total of 3 blue blaster bolts, which means 6 total standoffs. And once those had all been soldered in place, I grabbed an extra battery pack, I tipped the diorama up on its side, and I began finding the positive and negative ends, which I marked with a pencil. To keep the voltage requirements low, I will be wiring this in parallel, meaning I will use a wire and connect all of the positives together, connect those to the red wire, and then all the negatives will go to the black wire, which is connected to the switch. The last thing to do was to paint the sides of the diorama with black 3.0. After that, I called it good. If you enjoyed this video, I have a few more like it listed in the playlist below. Otherwise, that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out, as always, to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.